So I'm just going to start by saying I'm proud to be a Won Buddhist, which was something I could not say as a young child. Growing up in Toronto, Canada, in my elementary school, there were no Won Buddhists. There was one Won Buddhist in my elementary school, which was my older sister. So it was the two of us. And my closest friends were Jamaican, they were Chinese, they were Trinidadian, there was Jewish, there were a mix. And sometimes after school, they would come over to my house. I know children, they'd look around, they start asking questions. And so they said, Grace, I said, what? Like, what are all these circles around your house? And I was like, decoration. Because I didn't want to explain, I didn't even know how to explain anything. And they said, Grace. I was like, what? But why there's so many? Why there's so many circles around here? And I didn't want to lie, so I said, my father likes them a lot. And it's true, my father was a very devout Won Buddhist. And sometimes in school, we would have to fill out surveys, and they would ask you, well, what's your religion? And you have to check it off. Are you a Christian? Are you a Buddhist? Are you Muslim? No religion or other. So I would always check off the Buddhist, because I didn't want to check other and then one Buddhist, afraid that my teacher would ask me, well, what is Won Buddhism? I wanted to avoid that as well. So I think much of my young years, I felt quite like the black sheep, being a Won Buddhist. I envied my friends, especially my Jewish friends who would go to summer camp, and then my other church friends who would go on these trips with their minister to, bowling, and all these other things that they were able to socialize with other young people because there were other young people. But as a Won Buddhist in Toronto, it was tough because there were none, especially around my age. So many people will wonder, well, what made you stay as a Won Buddhist? And the answer to me when I look back, it's very simple. And that is, I saw living evidence that the teaching works. That if you follow the training of Won Buddhism, that you can become a living and active Buddha. Because these teachings were created to make living Buddhas. So from the outside, these living Buddhas look just like any of us. They have flesh, they have face, hands, eyes, nose, hair. You wouldn't know that they were this living Buddha. But when you watch them closely, when you watch them, the way they think, the way they act, the way they use their six sense organs, something is different. So our third prime Dharma master, Master Taesan, once said that in this contemporary age, in this modern age, we need more active Buddhas. We have to create more active living Buddhas. Because he goes on to explain that we didn't just come here for personal awakening. We came here to do work on behalf not only of ourselves, but on behalf of the world. So what he was pointing out is that in this day and age, theory is not enough. Concept, living on the world of concept is not enough. We have to go out there. We have to be engaged. Go out there in society, get involved. And as you do that, as we do our daily activities, that becomes our practice, and awakening is found within our activities. But when you hear the words, work on behalf of the world, it may seem so grandiose, so huge, unrealistic, far-fetched. But actually, it can be as simple as peeling an apple. When I was 7, my family and we went to San Francisco, and at that time, one of our elders, our Won Buddhist elders, Venerable Huynh, he lived there in San Francisco at a retreat center. And he was close to 80 at the time that we went. And he'd been living there for quite some time, helping to establish the first temples in the United States. And I remember sitting at the breakfast table, there's like a whole group of us sitting at the table, and we finished eating, and he had finished first. And he started peeling an apple by himself. And in Korean, in East Asian culture, usually it's the younger ones that go and they peel the apple and they cut it for the elders. But for him, he started peeling it, And then some people around him were like, "Ah, Sang Jungsa님, we'll do it for you, don't we?" And he's like, "No, no, no." And he started shooing them away. And he started cutting it very slowly and mindfully and chopped it up and shared it with everyone else. And this was very shocking to me. Maybe not so much in the West, but for us, growing up in a Korean household, it was very shocking. But he had shown me the importance of self-power. And so the reason why I remember this is because it was one of those moments of, wow, something's different about him. He doesn't just follow the customs. He may have been born and raised in Korea, but he doesn't just follow what the culture tells him to do. He lived differently. And even when he spoke to me or my sister, he would use the honorific. Because for those of you who know Korean, there's the formal and informal speech patterns. But he would speak to us as if we were adults, which again was one of those, wait, what's going on? Because all the other ministers were just talking to us in an informal manner. Something's different. And my father was very close to him, so at that time they didn't use email, okay? So they would write, snail mail, write letters. And a few years back I saw the letters, I gathered the letters and I just kind of briefly looked through them because my father had saved them. And I noticed something very interesting. His first words for each letter was the same, his first expression. And it was just simply thank you. All of them. I looked through them like, maybe there's one where he doesn't say thank you. Each one he says, thank you for writing this, thank you for your letter. And the great thing about snail mail is that you can tell through the writing the sincerity and the thought that goes into the writing. With email, you don't get that feeling as much anymore. But I remember looking at it and he was just done. You could tell he had probably spent his time and sincerity writing each line. So he was teaching me the importance of maintaining the mind of practice in everything that you do. Everything was an opportunity for practice. Peeling an apple, talking to a child, responding to a letter. And I think through watching this, that's where I grew my faith in One Buddhism. It wasn't through just reading scriptures, listening to Dharma talks. It was really through looking at these elders and the way that they lived. And they made me realize that there is no difference between the spiritual and the mundane. You can make even the most mundane thing spiritual. So I met another living Buddha when I lived in Philadelphia and I attended the One Institute of Graduate Studies. And he was the president of the school at that time, and we called him President Ko. And he was a lay member of One Buddhism. And he was a retired professor of Seoul National University. He was also at one point the vice president of Seoul National University. But he'd retired, and the third Prime Dharma Master had asked him, requested him especially, we need help. We have this young school that we need to start. We need your expertise. Can you go? So I don't know, for those of you who are retired and you just work your life teaching and you're just getting ready for the next chapter of your life, and then somebody and your mentor asks you to go start another school, I don't know how you would respond to that. But I was told that he did not hesitate, and he said, yes, I will go. And I remember meeting him for the first time, not very tall, but very charismatic, very intelligent. And he was so sharp. He was very sharp. And he was also he was close to 80 years old. And can you just imagine the stress of trying to start this new school where everything has to be done in English, there's a very small budget, you need accreditation from the government, have to build a bridge between Western staff and the communities from Korea. And yet he was able to accomplish most of this. Because when I looked at him, he took on that attitude of just really being the owner, really taking the role seriously. And so he taught me the importance of public spirit. And he knew that it was a small school, a very cute school. I like to say very cute. But he knew that it wasn't just an academic school. He knew that this school had the potential of really rearing and nurturing the future spiritual teachers. Teachers who would not just serve One Buddhism, but really go out there into the world. And so he took this role very seriously and became just so driven to accomplish and help grow the school. So it was interesting, he would try to maintain his health because he was getting old, so he would walk to school every day. He wouldn't drive. And he would help clear the snow in front of the school, even on the coldest day. And would once in a while go back and forth to Korea to make sure that he communicated with the headquarters there. But what's more interesting was afterwards. So he had retired from that school, so it's his second retirement, and he returned back to Korea. And that's where I met him again. I met him in Korea, truly as a retired professor now, as a retired president now. And not only was he showing me public spirit, but when I saw him in Korea, he showed me something else. He showed me the importance of faith. Because when he lived in the US, to me, he was just a grandfather. Because he didn't have many friends, he didn't know many people. All he did was go to school, and he'd go home, and go to school and go home again. And his wife, poor wife, all alone, and she would go to the dollar store like every day, that's what I was told, because she didn't have friends or family around. Yet when I met him in Korea, oh my goodness, the situation was totally different. When you're a retired professor from that university, it's the most prestigious university in Korea, and he made a huge donation. He had his own office, which is huge, his own secretary. And then we'd go to lunch, and all the juniors would do the 90-degree bow. And so many people around him. And even his wife, I would hear that now she was surrounded by her grandchildren and her children, and busy every day doing something. And I thought to myself, wow, you left all of this. You could have lived this comfortably in all this luxury. And you left this all, and you spent about 7-8 years in the US with no friends, with none of all this kind of, how should I say this, respect or recognition from those around you. Because to be honest, as I said, I just saw him as a grandfather, but here he was a totally different person. And this question brought me back to Venerable Sangsan too, because Venerable Sangsan was also the same age. He was about 80 years old. And he could have lived comfortably in his retirement home in Iksan, which is in Southwest Korea. And so I thought about this. What drives these two living Buddhas? What drives them? And I think it's a combination of true love for the teachings, a love for their community, a love for humanity, but really this really deep spiritual vow. The vow that I think most of us here have planted the seeds of, and we talk about every day when we do the Ilwansang vow, of really attaining Buddhahood, really helping sentient beings out of their suffering. And I think these types of actions don't come from thinking. I think these types of actions come from a deep place of faith, a deep place of compassion, and a deep yearning to truly make this one world. I'm talking about O-N-E, one world. Right? So what's most important to note is that these living Buddhas, to me, didn't teach me through their words. They didn't teach me through their writing. They taught me through their actions, which I think is far more powerful. And if it were words or writing, I probably would not have understood, and I may have easily forgotten. But when I saw their actions with my own two eyes, it left me such a deep impression on me, an impression that stays with me to this very day. So reflecting on these two living Buddhas helped me to reflect on myself. Am I embodying the teachings? Do my actions match my words? Am I keeping the practice on a theoretical level, or am I really applying the teachings in my life? And yes, I still have a long way to go, but at least I have role models who show me that it's possible, and for that I'm so grateful. And my wish is that we can all become role models for the future generations, that one day we will not just teach them just through our words or our writing, but through our actions. And then they will look at us and they'll say, wow, there's something different about him. There's something different about her. She lives differently. So I said, if my friends were to ask me now, if they say, why do you have these circles all over your house? I go, because I like them. Because they're my decoration. And if I were to have to fill out a survey and they say to me, what's your religion? I say, I'm a proud one Buddhist. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I always feel a reverent place is manifestation.